Well, hi everyone. Good morning. My name is Todd Carpenter. I'm the Executive Director of NISO, the National Information Standards Organization. I'm going to talk to you about a recently announced, recently launched project called the Collaborative Collections Lifecycle Project. Joining me today is Boaz Nadav-Menes from Lehigh University. To his right is Jill Morris. She's the Executive Director of PELSI. And on the end is Michael Levine-Clark, who is Dean at the University of Denver. So we have a lot to cover, and this is a huge project, so we're gonna try and go through as quickly as possible so we leave some time for questions. So libraries have traditionally sought to collaborate amongst networks of institutions because there's an understanding that not every library can collect everything for all of their to serve all of their patrons. And over the years, this has manifested in a variety of ways through interlibrary loan, through partnerships with other institutions, through collaborative purchasing and consortial deals. Building on this tradition, a variety of institutions have been partnering to develop partnerships to build collaborative collections. And we'll hear quite a bit more about that. But in 2020, a number of organizations started a conversation about how we can build best practices and tools necessary to support collaboration between institutions. And last summer, we put forward a national leadership grant to IMLS in partnership with 28 other institutions led by NISO, PELSI, and Lehigh, that represent literally hundreds of institutions, a variety of consortium, a number of specific institutions, publishers, and software providers, to put forward a grant to IMLS. We did that in March, and that grant was awarded for a 3-year project to advance this initiative. There are 3 parts of this project. The first is a standards initiative to build an infrastructure for how institutions can collaborate and partner and work together. This standards project involves not only an understanding of some of the technology, the middleware, and some of the data exchange necessary, but it's also focused on the culture necessary to support collaborative collections. A second part of this project is a research initiative that will be undertaken by Ithaca SNR. And the third aspect of this is the development of some prototype middleware tools, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So as I said, we were awarded the grant in March. It's a 3-phase project. The NISO members approved this as a project just last month. So we're going to be initiating a call for public participation in the project. We already have literally, I think, 4 dozen people who've already signed up who were part of the grant proposal process. And for the next 18 months, we will be operating on multi-tracks to help develop these standards and best practices and tools. We will then bring this out to the community for public comment, for a period of testing and user experience testing for these prototypes that we're developing. We've organized a steering group primarily composed of people who are involved in the grant writing process, but it involves a few other institutions as well, again representing libraries, consortium, publishers, and software providers. So where we're headed with this is really not only to develop the technical infrastructure to support the interchange between institutions when they are developing collaborative collections and how the systems will interoperate, but we're also focusing on the governance because, like most technologies, it isn't necessarily, the hardest problems aren't going to be technological. The hardest problems are going to be cultural in how institutions work together to share their collections in a collaborative way, how they choose to select items, how they purchase items, how they move them around the network. And that is going to be a cultural change in the library community. And it's going to require the development of trust frameworks, which is usually more difficult. The social aspect of standards development is far more difficult than the technical side. So to give you a little bit more sense and background about how we got here, I'm going to pass it on to Boaz, who will give you some more detail about the project, and then Jill and Michael will talk about, from their perspectives, why this is a valuable initiative. Boaz?
Hi. So I'm Boaz. I'm the University Librarian in Lehigh. I've been involved in this project for many years now, but here it comes as an IMLS funded project, which is awesome, and we're very happy about it. So just to kind of frame it a bit and leave it open-ended, because a lot is going to be discovered as we go about it. The collaboration between libraries around selection, around acquisitions is not easy. We've tried different things throughout the years. Systems are separate, so we're all supported in siloed ways in our own library management systems, in our own vendor-provided solutions. They don't talk with each other. The data exchange is not happening. When we need collection analysis at scale, when we need to reinvest resources in different things like open access, supporting small publishers, diversity and inclusion collections, anything, you name it. It's hard to do as one single institution. Once you bring in more institutions, obviously, it becomes much more complicated. Another thing that we want to kind of look at is to think what happens when something fails. So let's say we started a collaboration, the collaboration didn't succeed, or personnel changed, or like we had an Uber approval plan in between libraries, and then the individual selectors don't know how to interface with that approval plan, or agreement, or MOU at the top level. So this framework here is supposed to assist and support collaboration at scale between libraries, individuals, and consortia. We start nationally. It's an IMLS funded project. We have CRKN as a steering committee member and as a supporter, so we're already looking at collaboration between the US and Canada and possibly others. What we hope to do is so those 3 years we're going to be spending on thinking together. We're going to launch working groups in different areas. Like for example, metadata acquisition, selection, business, directions, you name it. We're gonna try and tackle anything that may be an obstacle or an opportunity to start to do those things more at scale and more systematically, and in a way that is based on standards of interoperability. So we are starting from the beginning with the collaboration between publishers, libraries, and providers. So it's very important for us to start from the thinking phase, to begin together, and then build up consensus also about the rules, about the way we work with each other that is different than what we have right now. Some ideas on functional areas of this is to create this shared index, so a place where library collections are going to be offered and also decided on. So, like thinking about vendor offers, but also holdings, or like things that we need to kind of de-accession together or do something together. So it's a lifecycle project, not just selection, but we're gonna try to do those things with a directory, who's what, working with whom, and also a shared index where all those offerings are gonna be there. a knowledge base, a hierarchy of organizations and vendors and all of that, data, discovery of those items. The human resources are really important because once you started to, you think about collaboration at scale, you want to have a way to network between selectors or decision makers across the whole infrastructure. So sometimes it's we will need it anyway because functionally it's going to be needed to offer the right things to the right people. But at the same time, you want to also find new ways to collaborate, and that's a way to connect people to different things we need to do. And communication between individuals and between even administrators. So the idea is to have a daily way to work together. So if you have a selector or a decision maker working with another one, another group, another selector, another entity, then we want to have a way to communicate between people inside the system. So we're not, relying on some other thing or, some other commercial solution. So, so there is a lot that we plan on doing. This is just a sketch because a lot of the functionality and the work itself is going to be reliant on a lot of time spent on thinking about those things. A core element of this work is to support diversity of collection effort, collection at scale, widening our collections, investing in open access and supporting small publishers more than we do right now. So we also try and question the scholarly communication workflows and a system to kind of make it a little bit more balanced. And we have representation from non-for-profit publishers in our steering committee, and also thinking about diversifying expertise. So, thinking about who's going to decision makers, right, open-ended, and we are thinking about ways by which we reinvest resources in areas of need, thinking about new ways to think, storytell our collections, our collaborative efforts, all of that. So now I'm going to turn to Jill. Jill is the director of Policy.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jill Morris. I'm the executive director of the Policy Consortium, and I'm really excited to be here, a part of this project with these collaborators that were on the previous slides. We became involved in this project much in the way that we decide to work on any of our initiatives. It's really coming from our members expressing a need and from conversations we have with many of our partners. So thrilled to be here because many of the challenges that Todd and Boaz laid out are the same ones that Policy as a consortium is facing, and many of your libraries are facing individually or within your own groups. So we're really excited about this effort. Just to give you a little bit of background on Policy, we are a sharing network, and I'm going to steal from Angela Crenyo at NYU, who always says we are a sharing network that's reimagining sharing. And we're trying to figure out how do we do this in this new environment, in this new ecosystem. So we've been thinking about strategic collections initiatives and opportunities for a long time. Within Policy, we're a nonprofit membership organization, a 501c3. We have 72 really diverse academic libraries from mostly in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and West Virginia, and just a range of institutions. But our underlying mission is to create cost-effective and sustainable access to information, resources, and services. So when our members join, they join in order to do resource sharing. We do physical resource sharing. We do electronic resource sharing. They also join, though, for shared expertise, for the network that you get as a part of a collaborative effort, for scale, absolutely, the innovation approach that we take to strategic projects. And then we've been working really hard on open infrastructure. And so for us, this project really checked all of the boxes for what we are trying to do. In terms of the specific challenges that we face at Policy that we are hoping to start to work on through the CCLP project, We have, as I said, 72 very diverse institutions. We don't share many systems. We have 72 libraries, we have 72 configurations. How do we begin to create interconnections between those libraries in meaningful ways that allow us to really achieve the scale that we're setting out to do? There are also other complexities that come into play, layers of collaboration, small regional groups within our consortium and beyond, multiple layers of consortial citizenships. And then, as many of you know, there are just less choices in the marketplace today, so there's less competition. So we're actively looking for ways to be effective in our work. In addition, the data coming from many of the sources that we're trying to pull together it takes a lot of manual effort in order to analyze, as I think many of you probably know and are aware. And so doing that at the scale of a large consortium or multiple consortia is really difficult. And we're looking forward to finding standardized approaches through this project for doing that. And then specifically within PALCI, we talk a lot about honoring the diversity of our institutions, where we really are trying to leverage all of the unique strengths and doing some of that diversification of collections that Boaz just mentioned. Some people say, apply that PALCI magic to everything that we do, but the reality is there is no magic secret sauce. It really boils down to shared principles, the people that are talking to each other, transparency and approach and openness, and then time-intensive hard work. And we're trying to minimize the time-intensive hard work through this initiative. So just really quickly, I'll touch on an ICOLC report that just recently came out. ICOLC, for those who don't know, is the International Coalition of Library Consortia. And there was a working group inside of ICOLC that wrote a report focused on strategies that libraries could use in order to accomplish their missions in the context of our current environment and the challenges that we're all facing. The first of which was radically rethinking operations, the why, aligning to our values, what we are actually doing in order to address those values, and then how in order to build the future that we need. The second is reframing what we do collaboratively, thinking a lot about the way we license and making sure that it works together, especially with those partners we're hoping to collaborate with. And that's really critical that we don't just sign those license agreements without really diving in deeply and understanding what we're talking about when we're trying to share data with each other. The third is community ownership wherever possible, just to create a sense of agency. That's probably what I'm most excited about. What I think is most meaningful with this initiative is the ability to really own that process and to make sure that those infrastructure components are ones that we have some control over, some say over. And then fourthly, specifically within PALCI, we've got to focus on strategic innovation in places where it makes sense for us to play a lead role. We're involved in CCLP, we're involved in resource sharing projects like Project Reshare, and Haiku for Consortia, which is an open repository platform. This project sort of brings all of those different things together. We're really excited to begin working on this together within our community. So we're looking forward to contributing within PALCI, both consortium staff as well as bringing together, again, that diversity of institutions and the staff from within them to work on collections initiatives. We're going to begin breaking down technical barriers that have been a problem when you're looking at 72 technical configurations across diverse consortia. And then we're looking forward to also working on breaking down some of those social barriers, because we're all very good at doing the collections work individually, but then when you come together, there's a whole new level of coordination that needs to be applied in order to make that happen. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michael Levine-Clark.
Great, thank you, Jill. This is Pippin. We adopted Pippin on Saturday, and it's probably not a great idea. Just for if you're ever thinking about adopting a puppy, don't adopt a puppy and then go away for a week and leave your wife with the puppy. New lesson learned. So as I've been thinking about this project over the last couple of days, we had a meeting yesterday about it. I've been reflecting on the fact that over the last 20 years, I have presented maybe a dozen different times at Charleston about some aspect of cooperative collection development. And it's usually about a pilot. It's usually about something that we've tried and been really excited about, and it's usually something that fails. It's very often something that we are doing as a side project, right? It's something that we try to do, but it's not the fundamental thing that we do at sort of the heart of our collection development. It's always an extra. And it, I think, needs to be core to everything we do, right? We need to be thinking about the cooperative collection, the collaborative collection development aspect as central to everything we do. So when I've been thinking about my library, I think about the various connections that we have. There's the local collection, right? There's the collection that we build to serve our local users, and obviously for all of that, that's fundamentally important, right? That is what we're here for. We are here to serve our community, however you want to define that community. And many of the decisions we make about the collection are essentially made within our institution without any thought to any other institutions. However, we're part of multiple different networks. We are all members of multiple consortia. The University of Denver is primarily part of two consortia, right? We are part of the Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries, and we're part of GWILA, the Greater Western Library Alliance. And within both of those organizations, we do a number of different types of collaboration on collections and other things. We're also really sort of mostly just in terms of transactions. We're members of Lyrasis and Neural and Skelk and other consortia, mostly just to get a better deal on some particular thing. Whenever we make a decision to participate in one or another consortia, we are in many ways limiting our opportunities to collaborate within the other consortium. So if I do a Wiley deal with GWILA, it makes it harder in some ways to do something about Wiley within the Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries. And those members, we don't overlap directly, right? So the very thing that actually makes it possible to do better and better deals, the consortia that we're members of, in some ways makes it harder to collaborate in other ways. And so one of the things that I would hope that we get out of this is the ability to bridge those consortia and collaborate across multiple different organizations. We're also a member of multiple different shared print initiatives. We're a member of the Colorado Shared Print Trust, which is part of the Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries and is a monograph-focused shared print initiative. I'm very active in WEST, the Western Regional Storage Trust. I've been the chair of that executive committee. I've been on the executive committee for many years of that group. And WEST is part of Rosemont. The Colorado Shared Print Trust is part of the Partnership for Shared Book Collections, right? So these are networks of networks, essentially, to try to collaborate about shared print initiatives across the country. Shared print is important. It's how we make sure that we are preserving our retrospective shared print collections. It's also very much secondary in the way we think about our collections. And in fact, one of the things that's been a challenge is that many libraries have left West. We've had a bunch of attrition over the years. I think because people can think, oh, it's shared print, it's not essential, it's not fundamental to what we do. And I would argue that it actually is fundamental, and we need to be thinking about shared print and about our consortial relationships as the basis for how we do collection development. And in fact, we should be thinking that the collective collection is as important as the local collection, and the collective collection enables us to build that local collection to support our local users as best as possible. We're one library with many tools. I think this is probably familiar to all of us, and I just happened to list a few, but there are others, right? We all work with multiple different tools that help us build our collections, help us access our collections, help us deliver collections to our users. Those tools don't necessarily speak to one another. And if I'm an ALMA library and you are a folio library and somebody else is working with another ILS, although I'm not sure there are any others at this point, it makes it hard to collaborate, right? The more systems that you use, if you're not using the same system, it becomes harder and harder to collaborate. One of the things that's really appealing about this project is that it's designed to work across multiple different systems, right? It's not reliant on any one vendor. The idea is really that if I'm in an ALMA library, I can work with a folio library. We also all have many vendors, right? And this is just basically what I could fit on one screen, but there are many, 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 many others. And if I buy something through Gobi and you buy something through ProQuest, it makes it hard to collaborate. And again, being able to collaborate regardless of where we acquire that material is really important, right? So it shouldn't matter if I buy it direct from the publisher and you buy it from an aggregator and somebody else buys a print version and somebody buys an ebook, right? It should work regardless of that vendor. And that is also a really appealing thing. And all of these things, the fact that we work across multiple different organizations, the fact that we have multiple different systems in place, and the fact that we buy things from multiple vendors, these are the things that have made our cooperative collection development initiatives fail. We had one initiative in the Colorado Alliance where some of us were Blackwell customers. This is, right, Blackwell was one of the major approval plan vendors, and a bunch of the others were Yankee Book Peddler, not YBP, not Gobi, Yankee, right? We were those two different companies. Now they've merged, but at the time we were working with, some of us in the Alliance were working with one, some with the other, and we were trying to collaborate across the two of those. That was really difficult, and it made a shared approval plan impossible within that organization. So we are really excited about this project. We want and need broad collaboration across the library and publisher ecosystem. We need your help, right? We want people to come and volunteer for the various working groups that we're going to be putting in place. We want people to give us feedback. We want people to help make this possible. I think it's fundamentally important that we make collaborative collection development work. So we have a nice working group that's been approved. We're going to be sending out a call for participation soon. We're going to be giving quarterly updates, and we have a website that you should all imprint on your brain and visit regularly. We are, I think, we would like to have some time for questions and conversation. We would love to hear your feedback. We would love to hear your ideas. We would love to hear how you think you might be able to participate. So thank you.
If anyone has a question, just raise their hand and I'll bring the mic around.
Hello, I'm Jo from Bristol University Press, and I just wonder what the timescale was for the project.
So the grant is a 3-year grant. So we have 3 years of funding for the initial phase, the initial 2 phases. The initial grant, the first grant that we had put in, proposed a nationwide rollout, which IMLS decided to kind of focus the grant for the first 2 phases and put off, if you will, the nationwide rollout. So we're only taking this through a prototype phase. Probably this is a huge initiative and probably will take a decade to actually fully get the community to fully embrace the vision that we've laid out, which is a pretty significant change in how libraries function. And those sort of cultural changes take a lot of time. We will probably, within 3 years, we will have some recommendations about governance and how the community should function, and some prototype tools that will be available for as open source that could be implemented either commercially or in open source tools. That will then need to go into an implementation phase, and that will probably take several years. I'm interested to think, there have been a variety of collaborative initiatives in the community over the last decade, thereabouts. Be interested to see, how many of you have been involved in one or more of the collaborative collections work? I see a couple hands, maybe not quite a dozen. From your experience, what are the sorts of things that, what are the sorts of barriers that you ran into in those processes? What are some of the challenges that you've faced in trying to work collaboratively across a network of institutions? Get them.
Jason Bauman from New York Public Library. And we have a collaborative collection development initiative around RECAP, which is our shared storage with Princeton, Columbia, and Harvard University. And we have some collaborations that are very successful and some that can't get off the ground. And what I'm finding, and that was kind of a question that was forming for me, for all of you, is that I find that often we put off the collaboration until some sort of technical thing is perfected. And often the collaborations that have been very successful, like our Slavic, East European, Eurasian, has no technical infrastructure at all, or the Chinese selectors that offer institutions are connected at the hip, and they do it all in Google Sheets, keeping track of what they're purchasing. So it seems to me that there's a piece that's about creating a collaborative culture, right, that isn't a technical problem, but is a how do you change a culture, and it often happens among selectors who take it upon themselves to work collaboratively regardless of the infrastructure or even institutional interest. And there was another piece, sorry, it's still early in the morning for me. There was another piece of that about the collaboration. I think a question that was forming for me is about how do you change that culture? Because that actually seems to be more important than any technical solution.
Yep. So the first phase of this project is to think a lot about the culture. The Ithaca SNR type of work is to investigate successes and failures in the past, and I think that quite quickly the question about the culture around collaboration and governance of those efforts is going to be there, and we're thinking, so your use case, when I was at Cornell, Cornell and Columbia did Slavic selection together. And it was easier because we had one person to do it for both collections. And that meant that one person, expert, top expert in the field needed to manage collections that are spread around 2 institutions at the same time. We were not using the same system, we were not looking necessarily the same approval plans, and we needed an infrastructure. So for that particular use case, we created an infrastructure that supports this one use case for area studies selection. And thinking about even what you were just telling us, spreadsheets, you know, there is a lot of work that is being done and not documented because it's easier, you know, like people are working with each other for a long time in a way that is comfortable for them. And that's highly important for us to continue and support, but also doing it in a more standardized fashion. So the idea is that, you know, if somebody leaves, if there is a need to change the direction of the, you know, like the collections building, you know, across years of investment, you want to have some legacy information that you can rely on. And a lot of the, like, from my experience, what happens mostly is that you kind of start with nothing, and then you start chasing kind of memories of people around what is what was the approval plan at that time. You know, Latin American selection is also quite often not at that level of, you know, I'd say, you know, like kind of continuation and sustainability over time. So there are ways, and we hope that we're going to discover those light ways by which we can make those efforts more sustainable and comfortable also for people to work with each other. And thinking about, you know, that use case, let's imagine that many more libraries or many more experts were involved in this effort that you're telling us about. How do we get there, you know, like beyond the 3-4 people that are comfortable working together and have built this intimacy around their workflows. And, you know, like we want to hopefully one day get to economy of scale where we have many libraries, many experts kind of enabling to work together across nations even, you know, and thinking how do we do that? We do need to kind of come up with fundamental needs, and how do we translate those to standards, to workflows, and in a way that, you know, is communicative and friendly, better than what people are doing right now, hopefully. But that will be always maybe a tension in this project. You know, this is what I'm doing right now. This is where maybe one day I'm going to get to, and here is a way for us to kind of proceed and get to it. So 10 years later, you know, you hope that there is enough buy-in and enough understanding that but what that question about the selection workflow and particular ways by which people are actually doing the work has not been investigated well enough. Like, that's clear that, you know, one experiment that we did at Brown when I was there, we noticed how many times one selector needs to switch between one system to another system to another system, even if they just have like a one area that they need to manage. Just that waste on its own is huge, and also it relies on personal interest and memory. And, you know, when someone retires, there is a whole breakage of communication around things. So there is something about that also needs to be looked at much more carefully, hopefully to come up with ways by which we are doing that better.
So it's sort of, I think, an important thing to think about that you brought up Chinese, I think, and you talked about Latin American studies, and very often when we talk about collaboration and when we talk about successful collaboration, it is some sort of area studies or some non-English material. It's not the stuff that everybody's collecting deeply. It's the stuff that is in some ways essential, but what we can think of as extra in some way, right? So we have collaborations on multiple different languages with the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I'm sure that many of us have those sorts of collaborations. One of the things that I think needs to change culturally is the idea that the way you collaborate is on things like non-English material. How would collaboration on something like English literature work, right? If we were all to buy, I'll use Shakespeare as an example. If a book is published on Shakespeare by Oxford University Press, we're all probably going to buy it, right? There are probably, make it up, there are probably hundreds of books published every year on Shakespeare. All of us are buying books on Shakespeare. None of us are buying we'll just say 100. None of us are buying the 100 books that are published every year on Shakespeare. We should be thinking about how we buy them collectively so that those 100 books are in our network. And it doesn't matter in some ways whether I have the book that's published by Oxford and you have the book that's published by Fordham and you have the book that's published by Cambridge. What matters is that our users have access to all 100 of those books and not 100 copies of the Oxford one and 0 copies of the one published by Fordham. And I actually don't even know does Fordham have a press? I think they do. But, right, so instead of thinking about collaborating on the things that are in some ways marginal, how do we collaborate on the stuff that is absolutely fundamental that we all are buying? And there needs to be a cultural shift in how we think about our collections to enable that. And that's what I would really love to see happen out of this project.
And I think, the waiting for a technological solution does happen a lot for us to get started. I think in this case, what we're going to try to do is pick apart small pieces that we can work on and learn from, create model workflows. We've done a lot of that work inside of PALSI. It's really time intensive. We can only handle 2 or 3 major strategic initiatives like that a year, where you are trying to deal with those more common layers, which we really haven't dealt with over the years. There's still so much opportunity there, but for a small consortium like ours, we've got 4 staff total. We can only handle 3 initiatives a year. How do we scale that up to the point where we can make a really big difference for our institutions? We look regularly at our resource sharing data. What do we need to do collectively in order to make that happen in a real way, and try to address prospective collections with retrospective data. And so I think, to the extent that we can bring some of this data together through, standard open approaches, we're going to be able to just make that analysis so much faster for ourselves. But the development of shared principles and approaches and the human side of that is just so key. Bringing everybody in from the start inside of a consortium, creating commitment to those shared principles, and then working forward from there, I think is, something we're hoping to model through this project and share out with the wider community. Are we at the end?
I think we are at time. If anyone has any questions, comments, would like to engage in the process, as we said, there's a website. We're also going to be issuing a public call in the next couple weeks. Please be on the lookout for that. We're really needing a lot of community involvement in this project, and we hope that you're interested in and would like